Rey flew the Millennium Falcon in The Force Awakens, and many people complained. I'm going to explain why this is a silly criticism. Now, there are many criticisms, valid or not, that I can somewhat understand where they come from, but Rey not being able to fly the Falcon has always been a weird one to me. I've spoken to people in depth about this criticism. Instead of just dismissing this criticism, I do feel it's important to listen to the other person and try to understand their argument. So the most common thing I heard was that Rey's backstory doesn't match the skills that she has. Now this doesn't just apply to her ability to fly, but other aspects of her character as well. But for the sake of this video, I'm just going to discuss her ability to fly the Millennium Falcon. So let's discuss her backstory here, because this argument that her backstory doesn't fit her skill set is one that I find to be completely baffling. In her introduction, we learn a few things. For one, she's a scavenger. She digs through the Star Destroyer looking for parts. Now it appears that she's looking for specific parts, considering she remembers how many portions she got for a specific part a week ago, so she definitely has a strong engineering background. Also, she built her own speeder, which is pretty impressive. Now that's not addressed in the movie, fine. There are so many examples from other material of how amazing of an engineer she is, but I will not bring it up because it's not in the movie. Now, does her being a good engineer make sense? I think so, considering the film does a good job giving us many clues about her life on Jakku. So we know that she's been on Jakku since she was at least 9 years old. Given Rey is 19 in The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, we can assume that she's been on Jakku for about 10 years. Now let's not understate that those 10 years are arguably the most important 10 years of someone's life. Those are the years where you mature into an adult, and you have to learn to live on your own without your parents. Rey had to do this when she was 9. When I was 9 years old, I spent 8 hours a day playing Call of Duty, so I can't imagine what Rey had to go through. Also, let's look at her living situation. It appears she has no close friends. She's known Unkar Plutt her whole time there, so that must have been pretty rough. Also, now that I mention it, Unkar Plutt must have taught Rey a lot about engineering. Think about it. He definitely didn't adopt her because he wanted to have a daughter, considering he treats her like crap. He probably saw her as an opportunity to make more money if she were a scavenger. He even sends thugs to jump her because she didn't sell him BB-8. So I would buy that she learned a decent amount from him out of necessity. Now, just because someone is an engineer, that doesn't automatically make them a pilot, that's fair. But I want to address something about the world building of the Star Wars universe. Now this is just how I always viewed the series, but flying doesn't seem like something that is that hard to learn. I always thought flying was similar to driving in our world. Almost everyone drives, so I assumed almost everyone flies in Star Wars. I mean, look at Coruscant. If this was real life, I can guarantee that there would be thousands of accidents a day. So the point I'm trying to make is that flying seems like something that is just as trivial as driving for us. It's not like Rey hopped into a jet from the United States Air Force for the first time that would take years to learn. The Falcon is probably the equivalent of a big truck or something that is hella fast. But even then, let's say it's not that simple. Fine. How does Rey learn how to fly the Falcon? Especially since she never flew it before. Well, for a ship she never flew before, she sure as hell knows a lot about it. She makes comments about how the ship hadn't flown in years, she knew exactly where the cockpit was and where the gunner positions were, she knew how Unkar Plutt put a compressor on the ignition line that she felt put too much stress on the hyperdrive, she was able to bypass the compressor when she knew there were problems with the hyperdrive, and she knew that Unkar Plutt stole the Falcon from the Irving boys who stole it from Duquesne, whoever the hell those people are. My point is, Rey certainly has a lot of knowledge about the Falcon's history with Unkar Plutt and the mechanics behind it. So even though she might never have flown it, she definitely knows her way around the ship and how it works. But even if that's not enough, even if all those reasons I point to still make you think she would not be able to fly the Falcon that well, I would like to actually go to this scene. I feel like people remember this scene radically different than what actually happened. She doesn't fly the Falcon like Han in the asteroid field or Chewie on Crate. She actually does a pretty poor job for the most part. Can we just watch the way she takes off? Let's count the amount of times she manages to hit something while taking off. Yeah man, she's really an excellent pilot. It's totally normal for a really good pilot to hit something that many times just while taking off. So yeah, Rey's off to a rocky start, which makes sense considering she never flew the Falcon before. Now let's look at what happens next. She takes off and Finn tells her to stay low, which confuses the TIE fighter's tracking, whatever the hell that means. She does a flip that I guess is kind of impressive, but not really considering she's in an open area and she almost hits the ground. Then 2 TIE fighters show up. Now it's time for me to say something that might be controversial, but I really hope not. The standard that Rey is held to compared to Anakin and Luke in the previous trilogies is ridiculous. Let's start with Luke. People say Rey's backstory doesn't match her skill set, but let's talk about Luke. Luke was a damn farmer his whole life. He was no engineer or scavenger, but a farmer. His only flying experience was with a T-16, which, let's be real, he probably never flew in any kind of combat before. So even if he has the most basic skill set to fly something, is it realistic that he manages to fight in a battle against a military-grade force? Is it realistic that he goes against dozens of TIE fighters? Is it realistic that he manages to survive an attack from Darth Vader? Is it realistic that he made a 1 in a million shot? Is it realistic that he was only one of 4 pilots who managed to survive the attack while trained pilots could not? No one criticizes Luke for this, but Rey manages to survive an attack against 2 TIE fighters and it's unrealistic? Now let's talk about Anakin. For one, Anakin is 9 years old in The Phantom Menace. 9 years old. He manages to win the pod race after not even managing to finish one before in his life. Then he manages to fly into space having no knowledge of the controls and manages to destroy the capital ship accidentally while all the trained pilots could not do that. Like, in what world is what Rey did more impressive than what Anakin did? I just really don't understand. I really don't. Honestly, the last point about Luke and Anakin should be enough, but let's continue anyway with the scene, cause why not? For literally a majority of this fight, she is just flying into an open field of sand. Again, nothing even remotely impressive for a character in Star Wars. Also, I just wanted to point out that Luke and Anakin both had the burden of being in charge of their guns, while, in this case with The Force Awakens, Finn is in charge while Rey just needs to focus on flying. Even with all that, let's see how many times she manages to hit something before entering the Star Destroyer. Okay, she manages to hit less things than before. She makes like 2 somewhat cool turns, I guess, before going into the Star Destroyer, but is that really impressive? No. She flies through the Star Destroyer, which is pretty impressive, and then does the cool flip at the end, which is really impressive. Even if very few pilots can make the move that Rey did, can we please stop diminishing the effect that the Force has on being a pilot? The Force literally gives people godlike reflexes. How do you think Jedi are able to block blaster shots? How do you think Kylo Ren is able to freeze this bullet right after it's shot by Poe? Reflexes, I feel, are like one of the most important things when being a pilot. So even though she has very minimal training, it's literally the same exact reason Anakin won the pod race. Qui-Gon even says how Jedi can only have quick enough reflexes to win the pod race. So yeah, considering Rey is super strong with the Force, I can totally see her flying through the Star Destroyer and making this flip. Also, I want to point out one last thing. Do people realize this is the only time in the trilogy we see Rey fly in combat? Like, sure, she flies to Ahch-To at the end of The Force Awakens, but I'm talking about combat where she's actively getting shot at. In The Rise of Skywalker, we only see her fly when she's leaving a planet or arriving at one, and I don't even think we see her fly in The Last Jedi. So people make her out to be this amazing pilot when, in the whole trilogy, she makes like one impressive move. So given all these reasons, can we please work together as a fandom to stop holding Rey to an unfair standard? Like, almost nothing during this scene was that impressive compared to other stuff we've seen in Star Wars. If you're someone who genuinely believes that Rey's ability to fly the Falcon is ridiculous, and Anakin and Luke's abilities are not ridiculous, can you please explain to me why? I'm not trying to dismiss any counter-arguments, I just really don't understand. And that is why Rey flying the Millennium Falcon is not stupid.